Welcome in, Agile Mentors. We're back for another episode of the Agile Mentors Podcast. I'm here again, Brian Milner, and today I have back with us the one and only Cort Sharp. Welcome back in, Cort.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Cort and I have been exchanging kind of war stories a little bit and talking about kind of some of the things that have been going on in our own coaching careers and some of the clients and things, issues that have been come up in some of these engagements. And I actually had one come up recently that was interesting. And I've had this come up multiple times with different clients. But this was an issue where they really wanted to kind of redefine and refocus their job descriptions, think about how to get the right people in their positions. And that's a common thing that I've seen quite a bit, is that a lot of organizations maybe don't have the understanding of, they might know the rights and responsibilities of a role, but how do I get the right people into this role? Have you seen things like that as well?
Yeah, actually, I'm working with some organizations right now that are kind of facing that same deal where, they're starting out in the Scrum process. And you and I were talking about this not too long ago, actually. And we figured, well, this is useful for more than just us. So let's put this out into the world, right?
Yeah.
But just talking about, how do we, now that we've learned kind of the introduction to Scrum, we've gotten that intro stuff, we've talked a little bit about what it means to kind of work in this new way or new to them way of working. I don't think Scrum's really that new anymore. I don't think we can still call it new, right?
Yeah.
But they've been facing the same kind of questions of, how do we figure out who fills our Scrum Master role? Or maybe we're hiring Scrum Masters or looking to hire Scrum Masters or product owners or someone in those Scrum roles there. What should we put in our job description? Who are the type of people that we should look out for? So I'm glad this has been at the top of your mind too, because it's been something that I've been experiencing here as well recently. So I have a couple questions for you. I'd love your opinion on some of it, your take on some of it.
Yeah.
And I think just kind of starting out, I think the Scrum Master role specifically, if you're okay starting out with that one.
Sure.
I think that one's often the most difficult one to kind of pinpoint down, like who is a good candidate or what type of person is a good person to fill this role specifically. And I think that's purely because it's working more on the softer, quote unquote, softer skills, softer side of the development process, right? Because the Scrum Master is focused on the people and process side, which can be a hard box to kind of check off and fill in. So, or at least harder than like a product owner who says, I decide what we're working on, right?
Right.
That's a little more straightforward, right? So I guess what's your take on who in general, let's start on the big broader side, the general side, who fills in a Scrum Master role well? Like, what are some characteristics that you look for in someone when you're saying, this person would probably make it for a good Scrum Master? What do you look for, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question, I think. And because I think you can derail things really early if you have the wrong people in these positions. And just in hearing you talk about it, I thought, it's really important. I preface this a little bit to say, if you're an organization entering into this kind of change, I think it's important to understand that that does not necessarily mean you need to have new headcount. It kind of depends on some factors I'll try to describe here, but you could get by with people that you already have that are on staff that you could just fit in very well. It's not a one-to-one with another job title. I think it really depends on the person. Cort, as I was thinking through this, I kind of tried to divide it into a couple of different buckets. One was sort of, what do I ask for? What's the job description look like? And how do I phrase things in the job description that will surface a more talented candidate pool? And it's a tricky one here for the Scrum Master part, because you want a person that has examples of leading without authority. You want them to show how they've been able to make change and go from places that aren't as experienced to more experienced. I want to ask for things about team leadership, about how I need someone who has good team leadership skills. I'm looking for softer skills in the job description. And that's a mistake I think sometimes people make with Scrum Masters, is they will list a bunch of things like, you have experience with these programming languages and all these other kind of things, where maybe in some roles, maybe, but I would say the majority of them, it's really not going to be about technical skills like that. Uh, it's more about you know, conflict management skills. You know, trying to help teams become higher performing, systems thinking. You know, are they able to get to root cause analysis? Those sorts of things. That's the kind of stuff I'd want to put in my job description, so that I would start to surface a class of candidate that isn't basically an engineering manager, right? I think that's the mistake sometimes, is that basically we just take an engineering manager kind of job description and bolt the Scrum Master title on top of it, which some of those skills carry over, but I would say there's a lot more skills that are needed that are not overlapping with that kind of sort of same skill set. That, you know, I focus on you know, that they teach, that they help you know, learn and grow and improvement. But those are the kind of things I want to call out in a job description. Are there other things you can think of, Cort, that you'd say for a job description would be important?
Job description specifically, I don't think there's anything that I would necessarily add, right? Just sticking on those softer skill sets and trying to find the people who have those little more softer skills. I'm trying to find a different word than softer, right?
No. I think
mushy skills.
I know it's people have a problem with the term, but I don't really have a problem with the term as long as we know what it is we're talking about. I mean, I will say, certification wise, I do train and pass on certification, so I do have a bias, but I will say that you know, my personal kind of stance, if I'm hiring for a Scrum Master, I would want to see at a minimum something like a CSM, Certified Scrum Master, or Professional Scrum Master, PSM, from scrum.org. Those two organizations to me are sort of the foundation. I don't, you know, I'm going to get in trouble maybe with some listeners here. I'm not trying to say that there are others that aren't legitimate. I think other organizations have legitimate ones, like SAFE. I think those are legitimate certifications. I think Scrum Inc. is a legitimate certification, but that's about it. You know, there's very few beyond that I think really would have any weight at all. And of the ones that are out there, I think Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org are the two that, in my opinion, personal opinion only, carry the most weight. So I'd want a minimum of sort of that, CSM, PSM, but ideally I'd want the higher level. I'd want an advanced certified Scrum product owner, or certified Scrum Master, or a PSM2 would be the equivalent in the world of Scrum.org. And it's not because I think that by default makes them better, but it does give you a level of confidence that they know what they're talking about. You know, that they're invested in getting better at this. And I think even just that, right? If I see someone with an advanced certification or PSM2, I know that person is invested in this, that they're not just here to mark the day, you know, and fill a slot. They want to be, you know, highly achieving. They want to be a good Scrum Master, which I think says a lot.
I agree with you. And that's a really good point there, to say, like, hey, there's this extra level of confidence that you get when you have some certification. And it's not just specifically Scrum Master certifications, but because I don't know, I kind of struggle with a lot of certifications because they oftentimes are just like an introduction. Oh, I'm a certified Scrum Master. That means I'm the master of Scrum now. Are you?
Yeah.
Really? Do you actually want to focus on the people and process? Maybe you have this introduction here and you see, you understand, you know the Scrum process now with that certification, but those advanced ones, that's a good point there to bring out, of that gives, if you're throwing out hiring for a Scrum Master, that does give that extra level of confidence there to say, oh, not only do you understand Scrum, not only do you know the process, but now you have that extra layer of drive to further your education, further your skill set, and want to actually pursue this a little bit more than just like, oh, I read online that if I want to get into tech, certified Scrum Master is the easiest way to do it, right?
Right. It needs to be this. It needs to be the certification plus experience, right? And it's not one or the other. But I think that those two things together just give you a higher level of confidence. And if I'm looking for a higher level of candidate, that's what I'm looking for. I think there's another half of it too, though, which is, all right, now that I have a good pool, how do I winnow that down into really good candidates for it? And for a Scrum Master, I think when I interview them, some of the same things I want to hear, like I want to ask questions like, can you give me an example of when you were able to influence without authority, right? When you didn't have the authority to make changes, but you were still able to influence and get things done. Can you give me examples of how you were able to get to the root cause of issues that maybe were long lasting in the organization, but, and how you made progress toward actually getting those resolved. I want to be very careful. Like you think about red flags. I want to be careful if I hear them talk about things that are kind of more meeting centric language that, I ran this meeting and I ran this and, well, okay, great. It's great that you were able to do that, but wasn't effective, right?
Right.
But what did you actually get out of it? Tool ownership. Hey, I was the Jira admin for this. Well, again, great. Like you may know how to set Jira up really wonderfully, but how did that translate into actually getting the team to improve and get better? Was it a tool that actually helped that? Or was it a tool that was kind of in the background and it never really made an impact? So it didn't really matter if we used it or not. I'd be careful if they have language about enforcing Scrum. That's a really key telltale sign, I think, that there's sort of a more traditional background that's kind of more ensure on time, on scope, on budget delivery. And if they use any of that kind of language about ensuring and forcing, kind of leading through authority, that's something I'd probably want to be a little bit more careful about.
Right. Not having what that communicates to me is like some kind of hierarchy mindset where it's like, hey, I'm ensuring that this happens all the time, meaning the responsibility ultimately falls on me, and I drive the developers to get it done on time, on target, on scope, on budget, all that stuff, right? Which a lot of those don't even fall under the role of a Scrum Master. So if someone's talking about, hey, I make sure that things happen on budget and it's all on time and I define all the scope of stuff. Well, I think that's indication number one. You don't really know what a Scrum Master does then, and you don't understand the role that you yourself are in theory applying to. I think there's this aspect of, because I don't know, I struggle with figuring out how to frame questions and even what questions to ask to get those softer skills to bubble up to the surface, right? Like how do you figure that out? And I like what you were saying there give me an example of a time where you led through influence versus not, right? Or, looking out for those red flags where if the answers are very systemic of like, I led this meeting, we did this, we do all the Scrum ceremonies, fill out everyone's Jira tickets and make sure the Jira board's up to date. Well, guess what? AI can do all of that, man.
Right.
Like that's not what benefit are you bringing to the team to say, I build good relationships with stakeholders and leadership within the organization so that anytime something comes up, they're not going directly to the team, they're talking with me and we can figure out the best way forward without interrupting the team's development process or constantly interrupting the team with new ad hoc requests or whatever. Or we're even flip side of that, whenever the team is faced with a problem that I can't solve right out of the gate, I build up these good relationships with stakeholders, with business people and everything so that they can get removed because it's outside of my domain of influence necessarily, right? I would argue through that, you still influence stakeholders or people who could remove these impediments to benefit the team, right? But at the end of the day, it is about how are we helping the team so that the team can maximize their time and the value that they're delivering on whatever it is that they're working on. Right?
Yeah, and huge bonus there as well if their description includes language about how they don't necessarily solve the problem, but that they help the team solve the problem, or that they build the capability in the team to resolve that kind of problem. I don't want a Scrum Master who is the rescue for every single thing that happens. I want them to build the team's capability to solve those kind of things.
Right. Oftentimes I hear and see, especially again, when organizations are first starting out with Scrum or first implementing Scrum, and you kind of touched on this earlier about hey, I don't just want like an engineering manager to just fill the Scrum Master role, right? There
Yeah.
are different skill sets. There's different things going on in each of those roles. But I do see that a lot where when organizations are first starting out, we don't necessarily have the capacity or need to hire new people right out of the gate, right? So who can we use here internally to fill the role? And there is that tendency to say, Scrum Master, they lead through influence. They help the team remove impediments, things like that. I think people really hear the leadership type stuff. So let's just put a manager in there, right? Do you feel like there are managers that could fill that role? Because my personal take is like, hey, if you have someone who's more on the people manager side of stuff, where they're managing the people, not so much the technical aspect of things, I could see that work. But do you have kind of guidance either within the manager position as a whole, where it's like, yeah, you're a manager in this type of way, that's a good sign that you would probably be a good Scrum Master? Or do you feel like there's a better role that tends to lead into that Scrum Master role or fill in that Scrum Master role a little bit easier or smoother?
Yeah, I would say, actually with Scrum Master or product owner, you want to be careful about having a manager in that position. If you do, then if at all possible, try to avoid having anyone that's reporting to that manager also on the team. That creates a weird power dynamic in the team that could really cause some havoc. But in general, what I'd say is it kind of depends on the relationship of that person to the team, not even just the person. I got an experience with that when one of my first roles, because I was manager of two teams and I became the Scrum Master of both teams at the same time. And one team, it worked really well. The other team, it didn't really work very well. And the difference was really how the teams saw me. One team, I was very peer, had more of a peer relationship with all the members of the team. We hung out a lot. We went to lunches together, those sorts of things. The other team, they were more junior and they very much looked at me as their manager, the person higher than them. And you can tell, one of those that worked and one didn't. It needs to be, they need to see you as a peer. So that would be kind of the dividing line for me, not even the title, but how the team sees them. I want to make sure we talk about the product owner as well, because there's a lot of really good, important stuff here for the product owner. For example, if I'm putting a job description out for a product owner, I want to make sure that I'm getting someone. I'm going to make a comparison here between the product owner and developer, even though I'm trying not to skip ahead. But if you're going to hire for a developer, you're going to look for certain kind of technical skills. And I think that same thing applies for a product owner, that you need to have some product discipline in general that is outside of Scrum. So you need to make sure that they understand, general business principles about how a product is successful, and how to understand the market and the competition, and how to make a plan for something to present, whether something is going to be successful or not, kind of weighing the pros and cons of an approach to doing something. I think that's a general product skill that's outside of Scrum that Scrum expects you to have. Inside of Scrum, I think you need a good communicator. So I want to ask for that in my job description, to say, this person needs to be an excellent communicator. They need to be able to talk to stakeholders, to developers. So they need to be able to translate between these two groups. I think they need to, I want to put in their job description that they validate assumptions, that they find ways to, pre-qualify items. They don't just throw everything at the team and expect some things to work and some not, but they actually try to do the work in advance to find out if something's going to be successful or not. I'm looking for also, I'm going to put in my job description that they have to be comfortable saying no. I need a product owner that's not just going to say yes to everything, but they can do that in a diplomatic way, and that they're data driven, that they have a way to evaluate what we can do based on actual data, not gut feeling that can be heavily influenced by bias. But do you have data sources that you regularly turn to try to tell whether this is going to be successful or not? And then I'm going to ask questions all about that when I get to the interview. I'm going to say, give me examples of how you use data to try to determine what's the most important thing to do. Give me examples of where you've had to say no to a stakeholder in the past. Give me examples of where you've had to deal with a difficult stakeholder that's maybe over aggressive or trying to push their direction when it's a better option or a better idea to do something else. I want to hear stories, and I want them to be able to. And part of it's just hearing them communicate the story, right? Because if I need a good communicator, if they use a bunch of big jargon, if they start to get, you start to feel yourself kind of feel like, oh my gosh, I'm tuning out with what this person's saying. That's not a good sign, right? It's not a good sign for that person to be a product owner, because they're probably not great communicator if that's the case. And your stakeholders are going to feel the same way, and your developers are going to feel the same way. They're going to tune out. So I need a visionary. I need somebody who has an idea for the future, the direction, that they take ownership of that direction, and they can give some clear examples of how they've done that in the past.
Right. I want to stick on one thing there, because you're talking about being data driven in decisions, which to me that screams metrics. What metrics are you tracking, right? What metrics are the product owner tracking? And that's something that I would throw into an interview position there and be like, hey, what metrics do you track to make sure that you're delivering value, to make sure that things are making the marketplace that actually matter, not just the new shiny object type thing, right?
Right.
So what metrics are you tracking, or you are having your product owners track, I guess, Brian, to keep an eye out for, to say, okay, this is a green flag. Are there any metrics that are red flags?
Yeah.
For you?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question, because this is where I want to hone in on, right? Because I want to know green flags, things that are going to be good are outcome-based metrics. I want to hear them talk about how they measured success based on ROI, on user adoption or attrition rates, or customer satisfaction. These are outcomes, right? These are things we try to drive with the things that we prioritize. I'm going to be very, very leery of someone who presents something like, yeah, we were able to increase story points that the team delivered by this much, or, we went from delivering 3 features to 5 features. Great. But it's only great if you actually did your job as a product owner and made sure that those 5 features were actually all really important. So
that they actually mattered.
Right. So how did you do that? Right.
Right.
That's what I want to know. And so I think you're absolutely right to hone in on that. Is it an outcome-based metric that they kind of have used traditionally to judge success? Or is it an output-based metric that's all about volume?
Yeah.
Volume doesn't really tell you anything.
Right. Which I love that you mentioned story points, because boy golly, have I heard so many instances where people are like, oh, well, my team's velocity is 100 and Brian's team velocity is only 50. So like, obviously my team's better.
Right.
And even just like, that's such an internal metric and something that everyone kind of sticks to. How do you show product owners then, I guess? Let's get into, little outside the interview process stuff. But how do you show product owners, like, we don't want to just increase our velocity, when in fact, stable velocity, a little more consistent velocity that is stable, is actually a better metric, or actually a better indicator that the output or the outcome is much better than just a volumetric output?
Yeah, and this sometimes blows product people's minds when you kind of enter this discussion, because what we're actually proposing in Agile seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, and that is that doing less can actually be better. As a product person, there's that part of the Agile Manifesto that says simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. There's a great drawing that Henrik Kniberg has, sorry, I got it wrong, has, where he shows kind of a person loading up a truck full of just regular old bricks, and then another person loading up another truck with gold bricks, but the regular brick truck is full, the gold brick truck only has a couple of them in there. But you see that and you recognize that's what we're trying to do as a product person, is find the gold bricks. Not just load it up with any old brick that we find, but we want to find the things that are going to actually deliver value. And if that slows our overall output pace, that's actually okay. Because again, if we're taking the time to find the gold bricks, then we have more gold in our truck, right, at the end of the day. And that does take more work to determine that. But that's kind of what I'd want to try to emphasize with a product owner, to get them to understand, is it's okay for the team to actually do less, as long as the things they're doing, you are investing enough time in advance to make sure that they're actually valuable.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's dive over to developers now.
Yeah.
Obviously, very dependent on what type of product you're building, very dependent on what the foundation is that's already been established at the organization, right? I don't want to be looking for, an HTML developer if we're working primarily in database structures, right? We don't need a front end person necessarily right out of the gate there, right? Those aren't the skills we're looking for. But outside of the specific like programming languages or programming skills, what are there any indications that this person would be a great developer on a Scrum team specifically, right?
Yeah.
What do you look
It's
out
a
for that?
It's a great question because I think you're right. A lot of times we stop at just the technical skills and say, well, I just need someone that can do this, that, and the other. And, that's what I'm going to look for, which, you know, I'm not saying that those aren't important, but I'm saying that if you want them to be successful in the Scrum team, there's other qualities. And this is going to get into my performance review of them as well. I don't want someone who is the lone wolf that can kind of, or, the term that people used to use all the time is rock star, right? That's my rock star developer. And usually what that meant was they went and put their headphones on and worked by themselves. They could knock anything out, but they kind of worked as a lone wolf, right? They worked on their own, were not really a team player or teammate. And so that's what I'm looking for in addition to the skills for a Scrum team is a team player. I want to ask things in the job description. I want to make sure they're clear as well, because frankly, some developers are just going to say that's not for me. And that's okay. I'd rather know that up front, right? But I want to put in the job description that I need a team player. I need someone who is focused on not just the quality of their work, but the quality of the team's work, and trying to raise the temperature of the entire group around them, not just themselves, and having that desire to always get to the next level, right? Of constant improvement and getting better. I want them to have, a testing or quality mindset that it's really important to them that they do high quality work, because I need them to own that, right? I want them to own that as a team and as a developer. And this one is, some of these things you may not be able to suss out in the job description. You may have to be the actual interview, but I want to test their comfort with ambiguity. I don't want to have someone who needs everything spelled out.
Yeah.
So what level of detail are you expecting before you start work on something? Do you need to know everything? Are you looking to know the basics of it so that you can get started and then explore and figure out what's the right stuff to do? These are all things that I think are really important, and being able to slice work down into smaller segments so it's not just one big chunk. And that's what I want to ask questions about in the interview as well is, can you tell me examples of when you had to break something down into smaller portions? Can you give me an example of when you had to work on something that you didn't really know all the details about yet, but you were okay with, that ambiguity and able to figure it out with the team as you went along?
Right.
Can you give me examples of when you helped another teammate improve and get better? That's the kind of person I want on my team. And I will be honest with everyone here as well. I would rather have less technical skill and stronger collaboration skill than the reverse. And I think that's the mistake a lot of times organizations will make, is they'll put the technical skill first, and then, if they have a little bit of this other stuff, great.
Right.
I want the collaboration skill one, because if they do that, then it will cover all the knowledge gaps, right? If I'm on a team of 5 people, I can't know everything. No one else on the team is going to know everything, but collectively we can. Collectively we can pool our knowledge, and that only is going to be beneficial to us if we are comfortable collaborating with each other. So it's kind of a opposite kind of thing that I think a lot of people look for, but I would put the collaboration as kind of even more important than the technical skill.
I 1000% agree with you on that one. In my own personal experience, my own personal life, I've experienced this many times. And also just talking with some of my friends and colleagues who are in various organizations around at various levels, right? It's so much easier to teach the technical skill and the technical know-how than it is to teach how to work well with other people, right? I think you, again, just really nailed that one there, where the technical know-how often is the first thing to say, yeah, we need someone who has, 10 years experience working in this language on these platforms, blah, 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 right? But I don't I don't know. If I was in a position where I was hiring, I would much rather want to work with someone that I enjoyed working with
Yeah.
and that my teammates enjoyed working with, or my team, if I'm hiring for a team, my team enjoys working with, whatever, right? Because the technical skills can be learned, they can be taught, they can be very, very much so. I'm not going to say easily passed down or passed from one person to the next, but it's significantly easier to teach the technical skills than it is to teach, here's how to work with people, here's how to work
Right.
together, right?
Yeah.
So much of so many hiccups, roadblocks, and just holdups in any kind of process. Doesn't matter if you're Scrum, Agile, or working in tech or not. So many times the problem just comes down to this person does not work well with this other person, or this person doesn't
Mhm.
work well with this team, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, right? And oftentimes the people don't even recognize that we're not working well together, right? It's just,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we kind of bicker, we butt heads, but in the end we figure it out and the thing gets delivered, right? Well, is that the best outcome? Is that really what we're trying to do here? So I'm curious, Brian, would you at some point in the interview process or hiring process, I guess, would you ever bring the team that this person would potentially be on into the process at all to say, hey, let's do a little bit of a litmus test of, one, does this person like the teammates here that they're working with or could work with? And two, does the team like this person or work well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say on that like I would want a standard kind of form that I would give to the team as they interview different people. And one of the things I'd want on that form is cultural fit with the team. How would you rate their fit with a team? Now, I want to be careful about that because I don't want it to be that can be carried to an extreme, right? Where now you're just into biases. But I don't want to coach them to not go into that area. But I do think it's important to say, do they fit? Do they feel like they fit with the remainder of the team and that this can be an effective team working together? Absolutely, I want them to have feedback on that. One of the clients I worked with recently had this really great way of thinking about some of these skills we've been talking about. They divided them up into skills that could be taught and skills that needed to be innate. That just is an innate quality of that characteristic of that kind of person. If they don't have it, they're not going to have it. And I would say for all of these roles, that's kind of how I would think about it as well, is what are those non-negotiable things? What are the things that need to be innate in the person that you aren't going to be able to teach them if they don't have it? This developer wants a great example, right? If they're not collaborators, if they are diametrically opposed to working with other people and they want a way of working that is individual, solo, I need to go put my headphones on and not talk to anyone. I can't teach that, right? That's a preference. That's a choice. That's how they're made up. And I can teach them about how long a daily scrum should be or what they should do in a daily scrum, but I can't necessarily change someone's mind to all of a sudden say, don't you think it'd be better if you got other opinions? Don't you think it'd be better if you actually got the best idea out of the group rather than just leaving it own to your own brain? Those kind of things are more innate. And I think for each one of these roles, you have to kind of separate those things out and say, what's the things they have to bring to the table on their own? What's the things we can teach once they get on board?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good just kind of upfront filter, I guess, to try to filter out relatively quickly. But then it just makes me think like, okay, what if I was in that person's shoes, that developer's shoes, who had the teachable skills, but not the innate skills, right? How would I go out and try to gather those skills or get those skills? But I think that's a different conversation for a different time. I think we're kind
Well,
of on the edge of time right here, but
yeah. And I think, if you're one of those roles and you're listening to that and thinking, hey, maybe that's one of those things that I don't have, then I think you have to just kind of ask yourself why, right? Why don't I think that's important, or why is that something I disagree with, or why is that something? What's behind that? And a lot of this stuff gets really into your personality type, and you have to kind of do some self exploration to say, is there a reason why? Do I really feel it's better, or is that just what I've always done? Does my personality make it more comfortable for me to not have to talk to people? And I think there's self exploration there, but from a hiring standpoint, I want the best person for the role, and there's plenty of candidates right? There's always plenty of candidates. And if I want to distinguish myself, then again, if I'm hiring people, I want stories. I want to hear examples. I want to say, give me an example of when this happened. Tell me about a time when. Those are the interview questions I want to ask in the actual interview, to try to see if they have an answer for it. It's obvious if they don't, right? They'll make something up and it'll be very vague, right? But if you ask for a specific example, give me a specific example where something like this happened and how did you handle it? But yeah, there was a time when, right? And it's that kind of stuff that you start to gain that confidence that this person not only knows the stuff, but they have experience in doing this. They're going to hit the ground running when they come in.
I also, on top of that, because just while you were saying that last little bit there, it made me think, oh, stories, right? We all want to share the stories. We want to have people who have the experience in the stories. I think we're seeing a lot of recent college grads, kind of younger people who don't necessarily have the experience. So I would want, instead of someone who, yes, obviously I want the experience. Yes, obviously I want people who have the stories to tell me. But I would also look for someone who, they get to the interview process. I ask them, hey, tell me a time when this has happened or you've experienced this. Instead of them making something up to try to tell me something that I want to hear, I would very much so look for someone and appreciate someone who was honest and said, I haven't faced that scenario yet in my career, in my growth, in my career path or development that I've been through, but here's how I would approach it if I were to be faced with it in the future. And here's what I would do to see if my approach was appropriate or not, and the takeaways that I would learn or the things that I would look out for to learn there as well.
Yeah. Or there was a team I was doing a project on in college where we did this thing. I don't care if it's an example from college. Like, that's fine, right? That's experience. So it doesn't have to be in a business context, especially when you're interviewing for more of an entry level kind of thing. Yeah, just give us an experience from your life.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. But I think the honesty is the bigger takeaway there, the bigger point that I'm trying to make of.
Yeah.
Honestly, I haven't been faced with that in a business setting, but like, here's the closest thing that I've experienced, whether it's a project in college, project in high school, whatever, or just outside in life in whatever way.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, the honesty is very important. Cort, I appreciate you coming on. This has been a good discussion, and I hope that maybe there's people out there listening who are about to enter this zone, or maybe it's time again to enter this zone, and you're kind of thinking through these kinds of things. So I appreciate you coming on and helping us kind of walk through this a little bit and talk through kind of the ins and outs of filling these positions.
Yeah. Hey, absolutely, Brian. It's always fun sitting down and chatting with you and able to talk about things that help me out in what I'm working on too. So I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks for your time.